They called you paranoid, said you were overthinking, accused you of imagining things that weren't real. But deep in your gut, where spirit whispers before words can form, you knew something wasn't right. Something was off. You couldn't explain it, not with facts or logic, but you could feel it in your bones. You could sense it in a room before a single word was spoken. And over time, you started to question yourself. Didn't you wondering? Maybe they're right. Maybe I am just too sensitive, too suspicious, too much. But chosen one, what if I told you that what they called paranoia was actually prophecy? What if your fear wasn't fear at all, but foresight? You see, when you're marked by the divine, when you're carrying a frequency that's not of this world, your senses become fine-tuned. You don't just notice what's said, you pick up on what's not said. You don't just hear the words, they echo through your spirit, layered with hidden meanings, subtle warnings, sacred insights. And because the world isn't trained to honor spiritual intelligence, they try to shrink it down to something diagnosable, dismiss it as trauma, label it as paranoia, gaslight it as insecurity. But chosen one, what you were really experiencing was divine discernment. Let's rewind for a moment. Remember those instances? Maybe it was a friendship, a relationship, a workplace where everyone else seemed so at ease. But you couldn't relax around that person. You couldn't shake the unease, the tightness in your chest, the nagging sense that something wasn't right. And everyone around you said, "You're just being dramatic," or "You're always expecting the worst." But what happened later? The masks slipped. The truth came out. What was hidden got exposed. And suddenly, everything your soul was warning you about proved real. That's not paranoia. That's prophetic insight. Chosen one, your spirit is like a divine sensor, a spiritual early warning system. And while others are sleeping through storms, your soul wakes you in the middle of the night, whispering that something's shifting in the atmosphere. You feel what's coming before it arrives. You dream about things before they manifest. You catch micro-expressions, energy shifts, coded speech, and it's not because you're mentally unstable. It's because you're spiritually awake. Imagine this, a watchman standing on the wall, seeing the enemy long before it reaches the gates. The people below call him paranoid. They mock his warnings. They tell him he's scaring people for no reason. But he keeps watching. He keeps listening. And when the attack finally comes, they look up at him in shock. That's you, chosen one. You're the watchman, the guardian, the one whose eyes were never meant to stay closed. And what they don't understand, they try to explain away with human terms. They call it anxiety, or trauma, or mood swings. And sure, yes, some of your sensitivity did come from pain, but not all of it. Because some of it came from God. This world doesn't reward seers. It exiles them. Just ask the prophets. Ask Jeremiah, who wept because he saw destruction before it came. Ask Elijah, who ran into the wilderness after carrying messages people refused to hear. Ask Jesus, who stood in front of his own hometown, bringing truth they weren't ready for, and they tried to throw him off a cliff. You're not crazy. Chosen one. You're in good company. See? Your gift of spiritual foresight doesn't come with applause. It often comes with loneliness. You walk into rooms where smiles don't match souls. You hear what's said, but your spirit listens deeper. You know when someone's energy is off, even if their actions seem polite. And that inner knowing, that sacred discomfort, that's not paranoia. It's your assignment alerting you to interference. So no, you weren't wrong for trusting your gut. You weren't wrong for stepping back from that relationship that looked fine on paper. You weren't wrong for being cautious when everyone else rushed in. You weren't imagining things, you were interpreting the invisible. And they laughed. Until they saw it too. Until the truth you carried in silence became a loud, undeniable reality. And then came the silence, the shock, the awkward apologies. Or maybe no apologies at all. Just stunned stares and whispered conversations. Because here's the thing. Chosen one, people don't know what to say when they realize the one they dismissed was the one who had the vision all along. It's jarring. It's humbling. But you're not here to gloat. You're not here to prove them wrong. You're here to wake up the sleeping and protect the sacred. Let that sink in. You are not paranoid. You are prophetic. And while the world scrambles to make sense of the chaos, you were receiving warnings long before it ever showed up. The truth is, your soul carries memories of realms your mind can barely articulate. You're tuned in to signals most people ignore. That's not weakness. That's spiritual maturity. They said, you're too sensitive. But God says, you're my vessel. They said, you're overreacting. But God says, you're seeing clearly. They said, you always expect the worst. But God says, you recognize shadows before they even form. And maybe you spent years trying to dim that radar, trying to fit in, trying not to be too much. But now, it's time to reclaim it, to trust it, to own it. Because when the enemy knows you can see him before he strikes, he gets nervous. That's why he tried to convince you your sight was broken. That's why the attacks came in whispers, in doubt, in shame. But it's over now. You're not paranoid. You're just early. And early is exactly where God placed you. So let's stay here for a moment. Chosen one, this place where your intuition was never broken, just misnamed. You've probably spent years wondering why your nervous system reacted before your mind could explain. Why certain people made your skin crawl, even though they hadn't done anything wrong. Why walking into a room sometimes felt like being hit by a wall of invisible weight. That wasn't anxiety. That wasn't a panic disorder. That wasn't your imagination running wild. That was spiritual sensitivity. And sensitivity is a gift, not a flaw. You see, when you were called, your entire being was recalibrated. Your senses, your discernment, your emotional frequency, everything was adjusted to receive divine signals. Think of it like this. A radio tower doesn't choose which frequencies to receive. It simply receives what it's tuned for. You were tuned for the spirit realm. While others hear the physical, you hear the spiritual echo behind it. While others see the obvious, you catch the shadow, the shimmer, the signal before the sound. And of course, that frightened them. You'd speak up and say, "Something's not right here." And they'd roll their eyes. You'd try to explain the energy felt off, and they'd laugh like it was superstition. You didn't have the vocabulary yet, but your spirit did. It was already speaking truth long before you found the words. Chosen one. Let's be honest, your body has been a battleground for unseen truths your whole life. And the world tried to convince you that your reaction was the problem, when it was actually a response to what others couldn't detect. You weren't overreacting. You were the first to respond to the shift. That's what seers do. That's what prophets feel. Remember, these spiritual attacks don't always come with horns and red eyes. Sometimes they walk into your life smiling. Sometimes they speak with charm. Sometimes they look like opportunity, like affection, like connection. But your spirit doesn't fall for appearances. Your gift sees through the veil. Let me give you an image. Imagine a field covered in fog. Everyone's walking through it blindly, bumping into each other, laughing like nothing's wrong. But you have a lantern, a light that reveals not just the path ahead, but also the pitfalls and traps buried beneath the fog. And because they can't see what you see, they accuse you of killing the vibe, of being negative, of seeing problems where there aren't any. But when the pit opens up and swallows someone whole, suddenly your warning makes sense. Suddenly, the fog clears and they wish they'd listened. That lantern, chosen one, is your discernment. It glows not because you asked for it, but because God placed it within you. You've probably felt like the odd one out more times than you can count. Like the one who ruins the moment by asking the deeper questions. The one who can't laugh when the jokes feel off. The one who walks away from crowds, even when the crowd seems harmless. That's not dysfunction. That's divine preservation. Spiritual sensitivity is a radar. It picks up on frequencies, intentions, unspoken motives. And while others live on the surface, you're constantly scanning for what lies underneath. You don't just hear noise, you translate signals. You don't just feel discomfort, you trace it to its origin. And this level of awareness, it costs something. It costs you relationships. It costs you peace in places others call home. It costs you sleep when your spirit wakes in the night, wrestling with truths too big for the body. But here's the secret. The cost is the confirmation. If you were just paranoid, the consequences wouldn't feel so spiritual. You wouldn't feel so responsible for what others ignore. You wouldn't carry such a burden to warn, to protect, to intercede. And if you've ever felt crazy for how deeply you feel, things understand this. Prophets always carried burdens that didn't belong to them. You've cried over people who never knew you prayed for them. You've grieved for cities you don't live in. You've mourned relationships that never even began because you saw what would come. That's not insanity. That's intercession. And your enemy, He wants to confuse the two. He wants you to believe that your sight is sickness. Your burden is imbalance. Your calling is delusion. Because if he can distort your gift, he can stop you from using it. But what happens when you stop apologizing for your sensitivity? What happens when you stop calling it paranoia and start calling it what it is, prophetic discernment? Something shifts. You stop hiding. You stop shrinking. You start trusting yourself again. You begin to realize that your gift wasn't given to isolate you. It was given to equip you. You were meant to move differently, to notice things first, to speak when others fall silent, to pick up on energy, shifts, spiritual threats, and respond with divine authority. Because, chosen one, spiritual warfare is subtle. It doesn't always come through loud clashes. Sometimes it creeps in through silence, through feelings you can't explain, through atmospheres that feel off. And while the world calls it paranoia, your spirit knows it's a warning, and the warnings you've received, they weren't just for you. They were meant to protect others, too. You've saved people without them knowing. You've altered timelines just by walking away. You've disrupted attacks just by discerning the spirit behind a smile. That's real power. Quiet, unseen, but deeply felt. And when the people you warned finally see the truth for themselves, it shocks them. Not just because you were right, but because deep down, they felt it too. But they lacked the courage to trust it. You, on the other hand, you've always known. Your spirit wouldn't let you rest, because heaven had already alerted you. And that sensitivity they mocked, it turned out to be salvation. Chosen one, you are not paranoid. You are aligned. You are attuned. You are anointed to detect the unseen, and that is why the world doesn't understand you. But just because they don't understand doesn't mean you're wrong. Now think back. Chosen one. How many times have you seen the pattern? The same loop over and over again. You spoke up, felt something, warned someone, stepped away, and later, truth confirmed what your spirit already knew. They called you paranoid until the very thing you sensed came crashing into their reality. And in that moment, silence always follows. Because prophecy has a way of making even the loudest critics go quiet. This isn't a new experience. In fact, it's ancient. You are part of a lineage of those who saw ahead, those who were mocked before they were believed. It's written in Scripture, whispered through history, carved into the stories of every chosen soul. Prophetic voices are rarely welcomed in their time. Let's look at one of the clearest examples, Noah. God gave Noah a word, a warning of rain in a time when rain hadn't even been imagined. While the skies were clear and the land dry, Noah began building something massive, something that made no sense to anyone else. He looked mad, paranoid, obsessed with something unseen. But Noah wasn't reacting to what was happening. He was responding to what was coming, and just like you, he couldn't make everyone believe. He couldn't force them to see the vision or feel the urgency. All he could do was obey, build, Prepare. And when the rain came, when the very thing he was mocked for became undeniable, they were shocked. But by then, the door had already been sealed. The time for mocking was over. Chosen one, you are often ahead of the storm. That's the prophetic burden. You're not paranoid, you're early. You feel what others will only understand in hindsight. You carry messages people aren't ready to hear yet. And because of that, the path can be so lonely. But do not mistake isolation for error. Sometimes, it's confirmation. Think of Cassandra in Greek mythology, a woman cursed to always speak the truth, but never be believed. A prophetess with perfect clarity, condemned by disbelief. And her story echoes yours, doesn't it? To carry vision is to also carry rejection. To hold truth is to often feel like you're shouting into the wind. But Cassandra's voice was not wrong, and neither is yours. That feeling of being laughed at, dismissed, silenced, that's not new for the Anointed. Joseph was mocked by his own brothers when he shared his dream. Jeremiah was called a traitor for warning his people. Jesus was accused of blasphemy for revealing who he truly was. Each one of them saw beyond the surface, and each one of them endured the shock of being proven right too late for many to change. So if you've been through that cycle again and again, feeling warning, being dismissed, and then watching it all unfold, understand this, it's part of your prophetic wiring. It's not about being seen. It's about being sent. And sometimes, your mission is simply to witness, to obey, to plant seeds even when the soil looks barren. Let's not sugarcoat it, it hurts. It hurts to be the one who sees, to carry truth and be told you're delusional, to sense betrayal before the betrayal happens and then be asked, why didn't you warn me after the damage is done? But chosen one, you did warn them. With your words, with your energy, with your absence, with your eyes, but they couldn't receive it. They weren't ready. This is why you must understand the difference between rejection and redirection. When people push you away, it's not always because they hate you. Sometimes, it's because your light exposes shadows they aren't ready to face. Your discernment disturbs their comfort. Your intuition disrupts their illusion. And so they label it paranoia, negativity, suspicion, but it was never that. It was clarity. You are not here to blend in. You're not here to be agreeable. You're here to speak what's needed, not what's welcomed. That's the nature of the prophetic. It rarely feels good in the moment. It often stings, but it saves. And here's the deeper truth. Some of the people who called you paranoid now live by the warnings you once gave. Quietly, humbly, secretly, they adjusted their paths. They moved more cautiously. They set boundaries you once modeled. They didn't say thank you. They didn't admit you were right. But their actions reveal the truth. You planted something in them. Chosen one. And even if they never acknowledge you, your vision changed the trajectory. So please, stop apologizing for how deeply you see. Stop watering down your intuition to make others feel more comfortable. Stop shrinking your gift just to maintain peace. Because your peace doesn't come from being accepted. It comes from alignment. When your spirit says, move, you move. When your energy tightens, you listen. When something feels off, you don't wait for physical proof. Your sensitivity is not a liability. It's protection. It's preservation. It's God whispering through your nervous system, through your dreams, through your gut instincts. And you know what? The more you honor it, the clearer it becomes. Have you noticed that? How the more you trust your intuition, the faster the confirmation shows up. It's like your spirit starts speaking louder. The signs become undeniable. The synchronicities increase. And that's because heaven responds to obedience. God honors those who steward their gifts without apology. It's time to stop calling it paranoia. That word was never meant for you. Call it discernment. Call it foresight. Call it divine intelligence. Call it what it really is, prophetic perception, and own it. Because the people who doubted you, many of them are watching you now with wide eyes. Not because you're loud, but because you're right. Not because you seek attention, but because your silence speaks volumes. And the world is waking up to what you've already seen. They're shocked, but you're not. You saw it all coming. You were never paranoid. You were chosen to see what others couldn't. Yet, there's something haunting about seeing too early. Something bittersweet about knowing the truth before the world is ready to receive it. Chosen one, you've lived much of your life carrying visions that felt too heavy to speak out loud. You've stood on the edge of moments where what you knew clashed violently with what others refused to see. And when you tried to give voice to it, they didn't just ignore you. They rejected you. They made you question your own clarity, but you weren't wrong. You were just ahead of schedule. Imagine walking into a movie halfway through, already knowing how it ends. You can't explain how you just do. The others around you are reacting to every twist and turn like it's new, surprising, even thrilling. But for you, it's confirmation. Familiar, expected. You try to warn them about the villain's true motive. They laugh. You say, "This character isn't who they pretend to be." They scoff. And when the truth finally unfolds, their mouths drop open in shock. But you saw it from the beginning. That's what it feels like to live with prophetic vision. You see the shadows moving before anyone notices the storm clouds. You hear the change in a person's tone before they speak betrayal. You feel the shift in the air before the fallout ever arrives. And because your timing is different, they assume your truth is delusion, but the truth isn't always welcome when it shows up early. Remember Jesus. He stood in the synagogue in his hometown, reading the words of Isaiah, declaring that the prophecy was fulfilled that very day. And instead of celebration, he faced rejection. The people he grew up with couldn't reconcile the divine message with the familiar vessel. They saw the carpenter's son, not the Messiah. And because of their limited vision, they tried to silence the truth by force. That same spirit still operates today. You walk in with light, and they say, "Who do you think you are?" You speak what's coming, and they say, "You're just imagining things." You discern what's hidden. And they say, you're too sensitive, too suspicious, too much. But the truth is, they're not rejecting you. They're rejecting what you carry. Because your vision disrupts their illusions, people get comfortable in their denial. They build entire lives around not knowing, around not feeling, around not seeing. And when your spirit walks in pure, alert, deeply aware, it creates discomfort. Your very presence challenges their numbness. Your eyes ask questions their souls aren't ready to answer. So instead of facing themselves, they blame you. They project their unease onto you. They say you're paranoid, so they don't have to admit they're avoiding the truth. They say you're negative, so they don't have to face the dark undercurrents beneath their relationships. But chosen one, don't absorb their fear. Don't internalize their projections. Just because they can't handle your sight doesn't mean it's wrong. You've seen through lovers who pretended to be soulmates. You've caught the bitterness behind fake smiles. You've sensed betrayal long before it became action. You've walked away from situations everyone else called perfect because something in your spirit screamed no. And time again, your warnings have proven right. This is the ache of foresight. You don't just experience life, you interpret it. You don't just listen, you discern. You don't just interact, you read energy. And because you perceive so much, you often carry more than most. That's why rest is sacred for you. That's why solitude isn't just a preference. It's survival. And here's the truth. Most people don't want to say out loud. You had to learn the hard way not to question your gut. You had to go through betrayals, spiritual attacks, and backstabbings that looked friendly at first, just to trust your instincts again. The enemy tried to confuse you. Chosen one. He tried to make you doubt your gift. He sent people who mimicked light. He used charm, false confirmation, counterfeit alignment. But your spirit learned. Your vision matured. You stopped waiting for evidence to believe yourself. You stopped needing validation to trust your perception. You began to understand that what you feel is often more accurate than what you're shown. Because energy doesn't lie. Intuition doesn't lie. And the divine voice within you, it's never been wrong. Still, it's hard sometimes. Isn't it, carrying this level of perception in a world addicted to distractions? Being so awake in a culture that glorifies numbness. Watching people run toward relationships and jobs and communities you already know will break them. You want to help. You want to warn. But you've also learned, not everyone wants to be saved from their illusions. And so you sit with your vision. You sit with your knowing. You sit with the ache of watching pain unfold exactly as you predicted. You sit with the heaviness of truth, and you carry it anyway. Because that's what it means to be chosen. Not chosen for comfort, chosen for clarity. You've been gifted with foresight, not for ego, but for mission. You weren't called to say, "I told you so." You were called to stand in the gap, to pray when no one sees, to intercede when others are asleep, to prepare when the sky is still blue. That's what makes you dangerous to the enemy. That's what makes you holy in the spirit. They called you paranoid. because they didn't want you to believe in your gift. They hoped if they mocked you long enough, you'd silence yourself. But here you are, still seeing, still feeling, still discerning. That means you won. You held onto your divine lens. Now it's time to stop explaining yourself to people who can't see. It's time to stop second-guessing what your spirit has already confirmed. It's time to own your vision without apology, because what they called paranoia was actually your preparation. Chosen one. Let's go deeper now into the heart of the conflict, where your gift of spiritual discernment meets the world's resistance. You've probably noticed it, how people get defensive around your presence, even when you haven't said a word. How conversations shift the moment you walk in. How eyes avoid yours not out of shyness, but out of exposure. That's not your imagination. That's not ego. That's the spirit of truth disrupting the spirit of deception. You carry light, not just metaphorically, but vibrationally. Your very frequency reveals things. And when you show up in spaces built on secrets, illusions, or false unity, your light doesn't just illuminate, it confronts. And people who aren't ready to see themselves, they don't handle that confrontation well. So they push back. Not by naming the truth, but by questioning you. They say you're too negative, that you always look for something to go wrong, that you can't just let things be. And if you've heard that often enough, it can wear on you, make you question whether you really are the problem. But listen closely, you're not seeing too much. You're seeing what's real. And the reason the world reacts so strongly isn't because you're wrong, it's because they're not ready. When the light turns on in a dark room, everyone flinches. Their eyes hurt. They squint. They get angry. Not because the light is bad, but because the light is different. It demands adjustment. It calls for adaptation. And that process can feel like pain to someone who's lived comfortably in shadows. That's why the world gaslights the gifted. It's not a personal attack, it's a spiritual defense mechanism. You shine, they squint. You speak, they scoff. You feel, they mock. Because if they admitted your perception was real, they'd have to face everything they've been avoiding. And so, they make you the villain, not because you are, but because it's easier than changing. This is where so many chosen ones falter. You try to play small to make others feel safe. You silence your knowing. You pretend not to see what you see. You even gaslight yourself just to maintain the illusion of peace. But let me tell you something vital. False peace is not worth the price of self-betrayal. You weren't created to make others comfortable. You were created to awaken, to challenge, to shift atmospheres, even if they call it paranoia. Because that word, it's often used by people who benefit from your silence. It's a label meant to invalidate, to reduce spiritual intelligence to emotional instability. But don't forget, Jesus himself was accused of being possessed. Elijah was called a troublemaker. Paul was labeled mad. Not because they were chaotic, but because they carried too much truth. The deeper your discernment, the greater the misunderstanding. But don't let their inability to recognize your gift stop you from walking in it. Let's talk about energy for a moment. You don't just read people, you feel them. Before words, before actions, before explanations, you sense who someone is. And for those operating in deception, that's terrifying. Because your presence makes it harder for them to wear the mask. That's why they get defensive without cause. That's why they accuse you of being paranoid or judgmental. It's not about what you've said, it's about what your spirit reveals without speaking. You are a mirror, and most people are not ready to see their own reflection. So instead of looking inward, they turn outward. They point at you. They dissect your tone, your timing, your energy. Anything to avoid the truth you carry. Anything to avoid admitting that your spirit already saw what their words tried to hide. This is the cost of carrying light in a world trained to worship shadows. But here's the thing, they can't unsee what you reveal. Once light exposes a lie, it can't be unseen. Once your discernment calls out the unseen motives, the manipulation, the hidden agendas, they feel it, even if they never say it. That unease they try to blame on you, that's conviction. That's truth pressing against their illusions. And you were never meant to dim that. Let them call you intense. Let them say you're too much. Let them whisper behind your back. Because while they talk, their lives start to change. Quietly. Slowly. Maybe even secretly. But your presence shifts things. You've probably noticed this too. People who mocked you still circle back. Maybe not with an apology, but with questions. They'll come to you in private. Hey, remember what you said about that person? You were right, or I didn't understand at the time, but I see it now. That's the real confirmation. Not applause, not validation, but alignment, truth coming to light, people moving in the direction you pointed, even if they mocked your finger while it pointed. So, chosen one, stop waiting for them to understand. Your calling isn't about being understood, it's about being obedient. You were sent to shake things up, to expose what's hidden, to speak what others avoid. You weren't given spiritual radar to ignore it. You weren't given discernment to suppress it. Yes, it can be exhausting. Yes, you'll feel misunderstood. But every time you choose to trust your knowing, every time you honor your gift instead of hiding it, you step more fully into your divine authority. This world needs you clear, not confused, aligned, not apologetic, prophetic, not paranoid. Because what they call too much is actually just enough to break chains, to stop destruction, to preserve sacred ground. You carry divine intelligence, and the world will call it anything but what it is. Don't let their labels make you question your lens. Now here's what most people don't talk about. Chosen one. What happens when what you sensed actually happens? When all those times they called you paranoid come back around in full color, and reality finally aligns with what your spirit already whispered. That's not the moment you feel proud. It's the moment you feel proven. And yet, even then, they rarely give you credit. Because the truth is, when your paranoia becomes prophecy, it leaves people shaken. They don't know what to do with someone who knew. They're stunned, silent, unsettled. Not just because you were right, but because being right meant something supernatural was guiding you. Something they can't explain, control, or categorize. And that is terrifying to them. When your foresight becomes confirmation, it exposes something uncomfortable that maybe, just maybe, there's a realm beyond logic, a dimension beyond data, a spiritual frequency that overrides the seen and heard. And they realize that you were tuned into it the whole time. That's when their words change. It's no longer, "You're just being dramatic." It becomes, "Wow, I never would have expected that," or "How did you know?" Or they say nothing at all. Just look at you with that half-humbled, half-afraid expression, because now they know you weren't paranoid. You were aligned with something divine. But by that time, you've already carried the weight. You've already cried in secret. You've already wrestled with your doubt, questioned your sanity, walked alone. Because before the truth shows up in public, it haunts the chosen in private. Don't let that part get lost. You held the warning long before the evidence came. You made decisions that didn't make sense to anyone else, but saved your future. You left places others called safe. You turned down offers that seemed perfect. You walked away from connections that looked divine on the surface, but felt off in your soul. And when the collapse finally came, when betrayal hit, when chaos unfolded, when the masks fell, you didn't need an apology. The moment itself was your confirmation. Confirmation through chaos. Chosen one. There's something holy about that kind of clarity. But it's also sobering. Because you realize what you carry isn't just intuition. It's intercession. You weren't just sensing danger, you were being assigned to respond, to pray, to move, to shield yourself and sometimes others. And even though they may never understand it, that's what you've been doing this whole time. Do you remember the time you felt heavy for no reason, only to find out later someone close to you was going through something dark, or when you couldn't sleep? Tossing and turning with a name on your heart, only to find out that they were making a life-altering decision that week. That's not coincidence. That's not anxiety. That's spiritual warfare. You felt the ripple in the spirit long before it touched the earth. And your paranoia was actually divine participation. You've been standing in the gap without even knowing it. Chosen one. Understand this, your gift doesn't just see, it shields. Your sensitivity isn't just about knowing things before they happen. It's about preparing the path. It's about shifting the energy. About making way for grace. And that's why your confirmation often arrives in chaos. Because when the storm finally hits, and the truth is undeniable, you realize your spirit wasn't trying to scare you. It was trying to save you. God wasn't punishing you with unease. He was protecting you with foresight. That gut feeling, it wasn't a red flag from fear. It was a green light from heaven saying, "Move now, trust me." And every time you obeyed, even when you didn't have proof, you strengthened your discernment. Every time you honored your inner knowing, you tuned more deeply into the divine. That's how the chosen walk. Not by sight, but by spirit. But here's the part that stings a little. And I know you felt this sometimes. The very people you warned will resent you more. after the truth is revealed. They'll say, "Why didn't you push harder?" Or, "You didn't make it clear." Or worse, they'll pretend they never doubted you at all, that they always knew something was off, too. And in those moments, chosen one, you've got to stay rooted. Don't let their revisionist memory make you question what you lived. You were there. You felt it. You saw it. You spoke it. You don't need their permission to honor your experience. You don't need their apology to validate your foresight. Because the reward of the prophetic is not recognition, it's alignment. It's peace. It's walking through a storm you prepared for while others are just now realizing they're soaking wet. It's being in the ark when the rain finally comes. And sure, that rain, it may confirm everything. But let me remind you, you built in silence. You obeyed when it didn't make sense. You endured the ridicule. You trusted what you couldn't prove. That's why the confirmation feels both heavy and holy. Because now you see that your burden was actually your blueprint. The spiritual warfare you endured wasn't because you were wrong. It was because you were right and the enemy knew it. He knew you'd see things before they manifested. He knew you'd walk away before destruction hit. He knew you'd expose lies before they could take root. And so he tried to twist your gift into something shameful, but not anymore. You're standing in the middle of the proof. Your prayers weren't in vain. Your warnings weren't foolish. Your discernment wasn't delusion. It was prophetic preparation. Chosen one. The chaos you feared has arrived not to destroy you, but to reveal you. And everything they called paranoid, it's now a record of your obedience. Don't ever shrink that. Don't ever doubt that. Because your spiritual radar is not only real, it's divinely calibrated. Let's bring it home now. Chosen one. To the part that often gets twisted even within your own thoughts, the belief that your ability to sense things, to anticipate outcomes, to read beneath the surface, is a curse. Maybe you've said it before, or whispered it to yourself late at night. I wish I didn't feel so much. I wish I didn't see so deep. And I get it. That gift has cost you things. Relationships, trust, belonging. But what if I told you that what you once thought was a burden is actually your divine superpower? See, most people move through life reacting, responding to what's already happened. But you're ahead of it. Your foresight isn't just a skill, it's an assignment. A sacred tool forged by fire, fine-tuned through trial, and anointed by heaven. And here's what the enemy never wanted you to realize. Your gift of foresight protects legacy. It doesn't just save you. It preserves your bloodline. It shifts your family's trajectory. It breaks generational patterns before they repeat. It cuts off cycles that were headed for destruction. That strange feeling you followed, that sudden decision to walk away, that painful boundary you enforced, those were acts of spiritual preservation. Chosen one. Your life is prophetic. Your presence is disruptive. And your obedience, it's generational warfare. You see it when no one else does. And because you see, you intervene, even when you don't understand it fully, even when it costs you everything. But you've got to stop calling it a curse. You've got to stop letting the weight of your gift become shame. Because the truth is, you're not heavy. You're holy. You're not too much. You're exactly what this realm needs. Let's go back to something you've probably experienced 100 times. You're in a conversation, and suddenly, you feel that something shifts. The energy dips. The words stop matching the tone. A flicker of something in their eyes makes you pause. And inside, your spirit is already sounding the alarm. But what do? You hesitate. You second guess. You tell yourself, don't overthink it. Because you've been conditioned not to trust your radar. But what would happen if you did trust it every time? What would your life look like if you moved with the full authority of your foresight? No explanation. No apology. Just alignment. Because chosen one, that's where your power lives. Not in what you sense, but in how you respond to what you sense. You've already seen how ignoring it plays out. You've already paid the price for silencing your inner voice. Now it's time to honor it, like the sacred compass it is. The next time your energy feels off around someone, believe it. The next time you dream something that seems too vivid to be random, write it down. The next time you feel pulled to pray for someone at 3 a.m., don't wait. That's not paranoia. That's not your imagination. That's divine communication. That's God speaking through your spirit. And here's the real shift when you stop seeing your gift as a curse. You stop hiding. You stop pretending to be normal. You stop making yourself smaller just to avoid being called crazy. You step into your spiritual authority and you own it. Because people may not understand you, but they feel your truth. They may not admit it, but your presence shifts their behavior. That's power, silent, steady, spirit-born power. And the more you trust it, the more precise it becomes. See, spiritual discernment is like a muscle. The more you use it, the more sensitive it becomes. The more you obey it, the more heaven trusts you with higher revelation. What started as a gut feeling becomes a strategy. What felt like a vague warning becomes a download of details. And before long, you're not just sensing what's wrong, you're seeing what's next. That's when you step into the next level of your calling, not just reacting to evil, but anticipating it. Not just protecting yourself, but preserving others. Not just walking away, but redirecting the entire atmosphere. You become the shift. Chosen one. They said you were cursed with overthinking. But really, you were blessed with foresight. They said you were unstable. But really, you were divinely attuned. They said you were dramatic. But really, you were reading the realm behind the realm. And if you've had to walk through hell to figure that out, so be it. Because now you know. Now you've lived enough to recognize the pattern. Now you've seen what happens when you trust yourself and when you don't. And from this day forward, you don't owe anyone an explanation for honoring your discernment. You don't owe them a play-by-play of what you sense. You just need to respond. Move when Spirit says move. Speak when your soul burns with the urge. Withdraw when the energy shifts. And know that by doing so, you are not abandoning anyone, you are obeying the divine. The enemy wants to twist your gift into a burden. But God says, no. It's a weapon of light, a weapon of truth, a weapon that doesn't just protect it, reveals, awakens, and disarms darkness. So stand tall in your knowing. Don't flinch when they misunderstand. Smile when they mock, because they always do. Right before they realize you were right. Your sight is not a curse, it's a crown. And the more they try to knock it off, the more securely it settles on your spirit. Chosen one, you've made it to this moment on the other side of mockery, beyond the confusion, standing beneath the light of confirmation that was always hovering over you. You were never imagining it. You were never broken. You were never paranoid. You were simply seeing what others refused to see, hearing what others were not yet ready to hear, and carrying truth that this world had forgotten how to recognize. And yes, that kind of clarity costs. You lost people along the way. You outgrew rooms that couldn't contain your vision. You shed identities that were built to make you smaller. You walked away from relationships that looked fine on the outside, but felt like poison to your soul. You let go, not out of bitterness, but out of alignment. You chose peace over performance, integrity over inclusion, truth over tolerance. That's what it means to be chosen. It's not about popularity. It's not about being validated by the crowd. It's about being consecrated, set apart, marked, called out of the illusion and into the reality of your divine mission. And when that happens, the misunderstandings come with it. They called you paranoid because your clarity frightened them, because your instincts disrupted their comfort, because your sight threatened their illusion of control. But you didn't need their understanding. What you needed was confirmation. And you have it now, because here you are, standing in the reality they never saw coming. The very things you warned about have unfolded. The patterns you sensed have revealed themselves. The weird choices you made, they kept you safe. The boundaries you set, they preserved your peace. The solitude you embraced, it grew your strength. You weren't being paranoid. You were protecting destiny. And now, your life is starting to echo the truth of what you've always known. Deep down, you were never meant to walk blind. You were meant to walk ahead. You are prophetic by design. You are intuitive by purpose. You are spiritually calibrated to detect the unseen and respond before it ever touches the surface. That's why you feel things before they form. That's why your emotions sharpen around certain people. That's why your body reacts to hidden danger long before your mind can process it. You are not broken. You are not damaged. You are not weak. You are wired for heaven's frequency. And now is the time to stop apologizing for it. Now is the time to walk boldly in your discernment. Now is the time to stop waiting for others to approve your insight. Because the path you walk was not given to the crowd. It was given to you. Not everyone will understand you. Not everyone is meant to. You are not called to the masses. You are called to the remnant, the rare few who resonate with your frequency, the ones who have also been dismissed, also been misunderstood, also been told that their sensitivity was weakness instead of sacred wisdom. You are not alone, and you never were, because every time you felt like you were breaking, God was building. Every time you felt isolated, you were actually being insulated, protected, separated not for punishment, but for power, the gift that others tried to shame out of you. That gift is your weapon, your shield, your compass, and more than that, it is your confirmation. So let them be shocked. Let them stare in silence now that your paranoia has become prophecy. Let them wonder how you knew. Let them whisper behind your back while your spirit stands firm, because you don't need to prove anything to anyone. Your alignment is louder than their opinions. Chosen one, the era of doubt is over. The season of hiding is finished. The time of questioning yourself is done. This is your emergence. This is your divine unveiling. This is the moment where you no longer shrink around small minds. You see clearly now, and you trust yourself again, because what they called strange, what they called dramatic, what they called crazy, heaven calls divine foresight. You were never paranoid. You were called ahead of your generation, and now the prophecy is being fulfilled in you. Divine confirmation, 300 words. So breathe. Chosen one. Let this moment settle into your spirit like sunlight on still water. Let every word you've heard today become more than just language. It's your confirmation, your reminder, your holy affirmation. You have not lost your mind. You have found your truth. You are not behind. You are ahead. You are not fragile. You are fortified. Heaven has been speaking to you all along in signs, in instincts, in silence. And now, everything is beginning to make sense. Every detour was protection. Every rejection was redirection. Every delay was divine. You are not what they called you. You are what God formed you to be, a vessel of truth, a seer in the shadows, a breaker of cycles, a guardian of sacred frequencies. And even when you felt alone, you were never abandoned. You are watched over. You are shielded. You are known. So keep walking in the light, even if others choose the shade. Keep trusting what your spirit discerns, even when the evidence isn't yet visible. Keep honoring your assignment, even when it's misunderstood. And as you do, the right people will find you. The right doors will open. The right battles will reveal your strength, because your path has already been prepared. And your steps, they are guided by more than logic. They are governed by grace. So take this moment. Receive it fully. Let it wrap around your soul like divine armor. And when you move forward, move without apology. You are not paranoid. You are prophetic. And your life is the proof. Now, if this message found you, it wasn't by accident. So subscribe, comment, share, and stay connected to the tribe. You are not alone. You are anointed. God bless you.